Welcome back to the Ohio Farm Bureau podcast. I'm Ty Higgins. We have all heard of farm to plate and field to fork, but sometimes the commodities grown right here in Ohio are for something in a glass. Jobs Ohio recently launched their Seed to Sip video series, highlighting the food chain for a bottle of Ohio bourbon. Joining us this week is Lorraine Terry. She's Managing Director of Jobs Ohio Beverage Systems, and Andy Vance is consultant and writer for this Seed to Sip video series. Great to have you both on the podcast.
Thanks,
Thank you,
Ty. Glad
Ty.
to be
Happy to
here.
be here.
Lorraine, let's start with you and kind of set the stage for what Jobs Ohio is and how the beverage system aspect comes into play.
Yeah, absolutely, Ty. What we are is a unique public-private partnership. My organization, the Jobs Ohio Beverage System, was created in 2013. We just celebrated our 10th year, but we are in a partnership with the Ohio Department of Commerce's Division of Liquor. And together, together we make up Ohio Liquor. And so our entity does all of the distribution and sale of high proof spirituous liquor in the state of Ohio. So any beverage with more than 42 proof, 490 locations, over 300 suppliers bringing us product to sit in bailment facilities here in the state. And it's our charge to distribute those products out to the stores in a fair, even method.
How big of a spirit business do we have here in the Buckeye State?
Oh goodness, it's growing, and COVID did spur that business forward just a little bit. But we are at a $1.74 billion revenue organization as of fiscal 22. We've seen the buying taper off since COVID, which is okay. Like I said, 490 stores, over 300 suppliers, 2 distribution facilities across the state. So pretty big. Oh, and I should add, 4th largest American whiskey buying state in the nation, behind Florida, California, and Texas.
Wow, had no idea. Andy, you have been covering agriculture all of your life, been a part of Ohio agriculture all of your life, and can really tell that story. You've done it as a farm broadcaster for many years, but this segment of agriculture is really starting to get more attention, isn't it?
Yeah, it's fascinating. When Lorraine came up with the idea for this content series, it all started with the vision of every sip comes from a seed somewhere. So when you think about, and you hit it well at the top of the program, that farm to fork kind of movement, there's been, I think, an interest from people who are enjoying great American whiskeys. The bourbon boom is a thing. They want to know, just like with every other food commodity we produce, where's this come from? Who are the farmers that are producing this? So Lorraine had this brilliant vision that we should tell that story. Farmers are great stories. As you know, you tell their stories every day. And what is it like out there? How is being a farmer who's raising corn, barley, wheat, rye for spirituous liquor differ from raising number 2 yellow corn and soybeans? Well, you could probably guess some of the challenges are very much the same, right? Mother Nature's a mother for a reason. On the other hand, some of the challenges are very different because this is a food grade product we're producing. There are a lot more restrictions, requirements. The supplier needs are different. Consumer demands are ever changing. The distillers have very exacting science behind what they're trying to do. So the whole idea behind this series was, how do we tell the story of how a bottle of whiskey, as an example, becomes a bottle of whiskey? It didn't just show up at your favorite OHLQ retailer one day magically. There's a whole process, a whole supply chain of individuals, craftsmen, artisans, farmers, etc., that make this happen. So this was a fun project to take on, and just a unique spin on the stories you and I have been telling for 20 plus years.
You mentioned that it all starts right there at the farm, and you had a couple of Ohio Farm Bureau members that you highlighted through this Seed to Sip series. Who are they, and what are their stories?
Yeah, we had a few, and one of my favorites, a guy named Greg McGlinch. Greg was out in Darke County, and Greg's a neat guy because when you meet him, he could be any farmer that you've ever met, right? A lot of the same background stories, multi-generation farm, loves the land, but he's got a PhD in agronomy, and he's like Mr. Rye, and so he had gone through the process of, he was going to become an agriculture teacher, which I identified with. I was an ag ed major at Ohio State when I started my undergrad studies. So I'm like, yeah, this could be me. But in his educational process, he got exposed to the idea that he really enjoyed the agronomic sciences. And so he kind of was pursuing a master's degree and got into looking at rye, and he realized, hey, we could be growing this on our farm and maybe diversify what we're doing out here in our operation, maybe generate some, additional revenue, some additional profits. And one thing led to another. Next thing you know, he's a PhD in these agronomic sciences related specifically to growing rye for the spirits industry. And he's become an expert in this. And yet at the same time is running this multi-generation farm, and they're producing this product for local distillers in and around West Central Ohio. And what was really cool about telling his story and 3 or 4 others like it is that not only, do you really identify with the farmer in them, but you also learn the relationship that they've built with the distillers. And as you would go to a distillery and talk to these master distillers who are like farmers, small business owners, entrepreneurs, kind of that idea of, I want to take charge of my career and do something that I can be proud of and leave a legacy and so on. The respect that those distillers have for the farmers and the vital role they play, it was really kind of cool because, I was thinking from the commodity standpoint, corn, soybeans, cattle, wheat, whatever it is, you always say, well, we're price takers, not price makers. When the product leaves the farm, the customer doesn't necessarily think about us anymore. When it goes to the elevator, I'm kind of done with it. And I wash my hands, and that corn's going to go who knows where. But the relationship between the farmer and the distiller is such that distiller's on the phone with that farmer regularly, be like, hey, what do you think about this? Or the farmer stopping by the distillery and getting to enjoy a bottle of whiskey that came from the barley they raised on their farm. And you just love that relationship aspect that was very, very different from, I think, what a lot of us who grew up in traditional agriculture maybe would have ever experienced before. I just love that respect and relationship aspect of the story. And those Farm Bureau members who are serving that industry, they're a credit to the organization, a credit to the industry, because they've earned that respect and built those and cultivated those relationships. It's really cool.
Lorraine, did you go on those farm visits, and what you make of them?
I did. Well, I went on one. I actually was at the very first shoot. We were on Matt Cunningham's farm up in Marysville. It was just a short drive from my home. I grew up on a farm. I knew what to expect arriving there, but what was a lot of fun for me was bringing a videography crew, right? Bringing our marketing team from our web development team out to the farm, out to see Matt's operation, listening to him tell exactly what Andy was just saying about this relationship. Matt didn't plan to create this relationship with the distiller. He knew, he found the niche. He knew that this could be a thing. And then he just started talking to the distillers. I think we're up to over 60 distillers in the state of Ohio now producing here in the state. And many of them use locally grown grains from right here in Ohio. To me, it was also a personal moment. Again, farm girl from London, Ohio, being back on the farm with Matt, and hearing Matt say what I knew has always been true, right? A farmer has to be an eternal optimist at all times because you just don't know what's going to happen next. Definitely brought just a moment of joy to my heart. And then Mother Nature did not cooperate to begin with. And so teaching our crew of marketing professionals, it rained. I'm sorry, you're not going to get to go shoot today. It rained and we're not going to go muck up his field. So yeah, it was a lot of fun. Sam Yarian was another one, right? I loved seeing these stories come to life for Ohio distillers. It started too, the more distilleries I visited, both locally and nationally, many national distillers have the exact same relationship that, say, a High Bank has here in the state of Ohio, or Indian Creek has here in the state of Ohio. And at a national scale, really just to bring that story home was what we were after. Bring it home to Ohio and prove to Ohioans this is being done here as well. And then also we kind of coined the phrase, when you respect the process, you respect the drink. And so we wanted that same thing here. We wanted consumers to take a minute, take a pause before you take that next sip and appreciate where it came from, and that it didn't just magically appear on one of our shelves in an OHLQ location. So yeah, it really just, that whole story came together really beautifully.
Lorraine mentioned Matt Cunningham, and I got to say, the other thing I love about Matt Cunningham's story that reminds me of probably every Farm Bureau member listening to this podcast is the engineering that he's done himself to grow his business in producing these great malts for the distillery, and he serves breweries as well, but breweries and distiller customers. He started, he gets some inquiries years and years ago about serving the craft brewing industry, which was, booming in Ohio at the time. And he says, well, I'm going to malt some of these grains that we're producing. So he starts researching heavily, how do I malt on the farm? And he builds this great big malting vessel, and it starts, it's kind of like a little proof of concept thing. And he's out here and he's welding and engineering and fabricating and doing all this stuff in the shop, just like, again, any other farm shop you've ever been in. But instead of tinkering on the tractor, the planter, the seeder, whatever it is, he's out here tinkering on a malting chamber. And then as his business has grown, as he's serving more distilleries, he's building a bigger one and a bigger one and a bigger one, and adding on to the operation and so on. But he's not sending off and having some fermentation chamber sent in from a manufacturer overseas, something. He's fabricating this out on his farm. And I just love that aspect of the story, because it really spoke to me as a kid who grew up in a Morton building with dad, watching him work on stuff and trying to figure out, how do we rig this thing up to fix this problem that we have? And it took me right back to that. And I thought it was a really cool aspect of the story, and true of, pretty much everywhere we went, you would see something like that happening. Very, very entrepreneurial and very, very hands-on.
Yeah, and that you mentioned entrepreneurial, that innovation also comes from the business side of things, and really diversifying your farm portfolio, right? So here's another way that you can grow a crop and find a new market for it, and that's what these farmers across Ohio have done. And Lorraine, you mentioned 60 distilleries across the state. And I guess my question is, are Ohio farmers able to keep up with what the distillers need in order to keep the product flowing?
Oh my goodness, that's a great question. And I don't know that we actually dove too deep into that question, but what we did dive into, and you heard, I think it was Echo Spirits say, they went years in advance. They were 2 years ahead of even the planning cycle to have conversations with farmers about what they thought they were going to need. So I would say, I think Ohio farmers are doing okay, keeping up with that pace. But it's the relationship and it's the time they put in, because you're talking 2 years before you plant, then you're waiting for that crop to be made available to you as a distiller. It could take 3 to 5 days to turn it into a white dog, and then 4 more years minimum in a barrel. So, and I think Andy even wrote it so eloquently, a decade could pass between meeting that farmer, watching that seed go into the ground, and then putting it actually in a bottle to taste. So distillers and farmers both, right? Eternal optimists and always looking out for that future mindset.
But Andy, it seems like that long-term market's there, though.
Yeah, and that's, I think the thing you hit on there, one of the things Lorraine and I talked about often, this industry is growing so fast, the distilling side and the farmers serving it, that we don't necessarily have great data yet on, okay, how many acres of corn are going into, and not just Ohio, but in general, how many acres of corn are going into bourbon as an example, whiskey in general. I was querying all of the ag stats type resources I had available from 20 years of farm journalism, trying to figure out, okay, somebody's had to have asked this. I couldn't find where anybody had really done a great job of quantifying yet. Just like we know how big the spirits industry is, Lorraine gave you some great stats on that earlier, but in terms of the agricultural component of it, how many bushels of corn are going into this, you could probably mock up some cocktail napkin stuff, but we really need to sit down and do a great economic analysis. But to your point, I think one of the things that was really cool about this series, in terms of what I learned about the farmers involved, is I don't think any of them we talked to, the spirits market was 100% of their market. So look at, we were just talking about Matt Cunningham, Matt started out and his acreage devoted to barley, as an example, might only been 5% of what he and his dad were farming together. And then that's grown over time. But that was kind of a profit opportunity, or hey, we're going to take a risk on this. We're going to gamble a little bit with, how many ever, 10, 20, 100 acres, whatever it was. And then we're going to see, is that a business? Now, his plan is to grow that, and he has grown it aggressively. He's going to continue to grow that aggressively. Same thing with McGlinch at Down Home Farms over in Dirk County. Same thing. It started out with, this is a small percentage of our acreage, and a lot of them, have had, or maybe they've got some livestock. They're really diversified as well, and this is one area to diversify the farm operation and try to inject some additional revenue opportunities, different markets. And I would say the ones that we've seen do it, Samarian was another one. That's one aspect of their farming operation growing, and will continue to grow because the distilleries here in Ohio, I think, want to buy. That was the thing we got from those local distilleries. They love having that relationship. Also true of the national brands. We had a great visit down into Loretto, Kentucky to Maker's Mark, and they love their farmers as well. So it's not. I don't want to give the impression it's just the local craft distillers. The whole industry, I think, is eager to grow the farmers who are serving these markets.
Yeah.
There's one more person in this whole process, Tim Derrickson, and I want to talk about him just briefly. He's very modest, and he will not talk about his role particularly in this project. But of course, he was deputy director at the Ohio Department of Agriculture, has been an advocate for Ohio's #1 industry for many, many years, and really has been a spearhead at Jobs Ohio to showcase this industry and everything it has to offer to the Buckeye State.
Yeah, Tim Derrickson is invaluable, extremely humble. That's very well put. Early on, it's funny. Tim shows up at work one day at Jobs Ohio. I'd already been there a couple years. I introduced myself. I realized regionally he lives close to where my father is now. We start having a conversation. I learn about his background, about the dairy farm turned golf course turned woodworking. Come to find out, he does know my father really well, and so from the beginning, Tim was a connector of people. So he got us on the phone with the right folks at the Department of Agriculture. He got us on the phone with the right folks at Corn and Wheat Association. He got us on the phone with the right folks from, I mean, you name it. And Tim was just this constant connector of people, and that's what he's good at. But yeah, Tim has done a phenomenal job at Jobs Ohio, bringing to the forefront Ohio agriculture, Ohio food and ag, what Ohio is capable of doing in that sector. And he keeps winning, and he's doing a great job for the state. He's popped up at many speaking engagements. I was super excited. He was invited to speak at the Discus National Convention. That was the Distilled Spirits Council of the United States, just last year in New Orleans at their conference, on the economics of distilling in a state. And he did a fantastic job representing Ohio. So I could not be happier to have Tim on the Jobs Ohio team, and more importantly, a fellow ag heart at the organization as well.
Are we expecting more of these videos to come out in the near future?
We just started. Well, then Andy goes and gets a new job. But yes, we are planning. Ty, the reason we kept talking about when you respect the process, you respect the drink, right? We're talking about responsible consumption, but there's more than just the grain. And so we want to go visit Speyside in southeastern Ohio and look at a cooperage. How are you making barrels? Where did that tree come from? Not to mention, let's highlight the fact that oak trees are an extremely valuable commodity now. They're not just for oak, for new make bourbon whiskey, but for many things that demand that kind of tree. So let's highlight that. I'm not sending Andy to Mexico, but agave, right? It started as a seed as well. We got to talk about agave and tequila. The berries and the juniper and the botanicals that go into gin. I mean, there is more than whiskey to be talked about here. So yes, I do foresee more videos, more content. We're hoping to get to some more of the national distilleries and bring their stories into the portfolio as well.
So Andy, no Mexico, but how can people find the videos that are already done?
Yeah, I was really looking forward to that trip too. I got a few distilleries in mind I wanted to visit. To be continued. Yeah, so I highly encourage folks to visit the OHLQ website, which, by the way, even separate from our discussion about the Seed to Sip portfolio, is a fantastic resource, recipes, videos with distillers. As a consumer of spirituous beverages, I have found it to be a tremendous resource. Also, if you're looking for any particular bottle, if you've got a particular bourbon that you're interested in, whatnot, there's a great little tool in there where you can find your local OHLQ retailer and get an idea of, is my favorite bottle in stock at that store, which has been super, super handy. Great tool of resources. But at the OHLQ website is the full Seed to Sip campaign. You can read the stories. We talked about the videos quite a lot, but there are a number of stories as well. In addition to the half dozen videos that we shot, you can read the stories of the farmers, including the Farm Bureau members that we talked about earlier. You can listen to the distillers talking about their product in their own words, read about both the national and the craft brands that we profiled. That'll all be at the OHLQ website. Just scroll down until you find the Seed to Sip banner and enjoy the content while you enjoy your favorite drink.
I am constantly asked about the diversity of the agriculture in Ohio. And you talk about, of course, the corn, beans, and wheat and all the livestock that we have. But then you get into the apples and even potatoes and fruits and vegetables we grow in Northern Ohio. But this is really eye-opening to see exactly how we are in the bourbon business in Ohio as agriculture as well. So really appreciate you guys highlighting this and taking time to visit on the podcast. Lorraine Terry, Managing Director of Jobs Ohio Beverage System, and Andy Vance, consultant and writer for their Seed to Sip video series. We'll put the link on this podcast as well at ohiofarmbureau.org. Thank you, guys.
Thank you, Ty.
Cheers.
Find out how Nationwide Agribusiness can help you grow your business. Get to know the people with the experience and knowledge to help you. Whether you are looking to protect your farm or ranch from the ground up, or need someone who understands your changing commercial ag needs. Find out how to better manage the risks of your ag business, or how quickly you can get back to business. Learn how you can protect your next with Nationwide on your side.
Welcome back to the Ohio Farm Bureau podcast. I'm Ty Higgins. In December of last year, the legislature passed House Bill 458, helped modernize and strengthen how elections are administered here in Ohio. To talk more about those changes and what it means for voters across the state, welcome in Ohio's Secretary of State, Frank LaRose, to the Ohio Farm Bureau podcast. Hello, sir.
Hey, Ty, great to be back.
On the road, as I see, always doing great work for Ohioans across the state. Before we get into those election changes, early voting, as you know, has begun for the May 2nd primary and special election here in the state. And ballot access and getting as many people to the polls as possible is always of utmost importance. Where does Ohio stand in comparison to other states when it comes to ballot access?
We're truly a leader in the nation. You're right to say that early voting is underway. Overseas and military voting has been going on now for weeks for this crucial May 2nd election. Now, only 67 out of Ohio's 88 counties actually have candidates or issues on the ballot. So if you have questions, check our website, voteohio.gov, because not every part of the state has something to vote on for the May 2nd election. But if you are in one of those communities that has an election on May 2nd, make sure you participate, because these are those crucial odd-numbered year elections where we decide who the leaders are that are going to lead the schools that our children are educated in, deliver justice in our communities as judges, local government leadership, really crucial to our families and to our businesses. Now, you ask about how easy it is to vote in Ohio. This is something that we're proud of. Ohio, state where we make it both easy to vote and hard to cheat. That shows up in the numbers that we've seen. Ohio has absolutely broken records in 2016, 2018, 2020, and 2022. Those even numbered years tend to have incredible voter participation. And of course, we're so proud of that in Ohio. Now, unfortunately, in these odd numbered years like 2023, we see a lower voter turnout. And part of that is that, it's on us to make sure that we educate people about how truly important it is to vote in these local elections. I mean, we all get pretty spun up every 4 years about who's going to live in the White House, and that matters. As a soldier, as a reservist, I can tell you that matters a lot. As an American, I can tell you it matters a lot who's going to live in the White House. But what matters even more probably in our day-to-day life is not necessarily who's living in the White House, but who's working at the schoolhouse or the courthouse. And those are decisions that we're making this year.
Yeah, voters heading to the polls as we speak. There are new rules in place, as I mentioned, to further enhance election security and guard against fraud. One of those changes has to do with your photo ID. Explain that to us.
Yeah, so this is a common sense thing that Ohioans have wanted to see for a long time. In fact, repeatedly, polls show us that over 75% of Ohioans, meaning Ohioans on both sides of the political spectrum, believe that you should prove your identity when you go to vote. The way that we do that is with a photo ID. Now, historically, Ohio has seen 98% of voters show up with a photo ID. That goes back decades, and county boards of elections in rural areas and urban areas alike tell us 98% of people show up with that photo ID in their hand. And for them, really nothing's changed. It'll be the same kind of check-in experience that you're used to. There's been that small 2% that have used the alternative. The backup plan has always been to bring a bank statement or to bring a pay stub or a utility bill or a government document with your name and address on it. Well, that is the part that's gone away. And so if you're part of that very small group of Ohioans who has used an alternative document to prove your identity when you go to vote, you're going to have to get an ID. And it's a good idea anyway to participate in modern society. You really should have a state ID or a driver's license. Those are the two that work. Also a passport, a military ID, a VA ID card, all of those things work. But if you don't have an Ohio driver's license or state ID, the state legislature did something really smart when they passed this bill. They created the ability to get one for free. And so now you can go into any BMV location, anywhere in the state, hundreds of them, and you can get a free ID if you don't already have one, because you're going to need one to go and vote. And that's something that we want to see Ohioans take advantage of. Listen, a majority of the other states in the country have similar requirements to this, where you're required to show an ID when you come and vote. It's a common sense thing that Ohioans on both sides of the aisle support. And it's a good thing that the state legislature got it done last year.
Any changes to the mail-in ballot process?
Just a little. And again, these are both things that are common sense things that election officials, Republicans and Democrats that do the day-to-day work of running our elections, have been saying for a long time. A couple of them are, one, you now have to request your absentee ballot a week before the election. Under the old rules, you were allowed to procrastinate. It was never a good idea, but you were allowed to wait until Saturday before election day. Now, if you mail in your request for an absentee ballot on Saturday before the election, chances of it arriving in time for you to vote it are slim to none. And so that was always a foolish idea, to allow people to wait all the way until Saturday to request a ballot and then just hope that somehow in 2 days it was going to get to their house and that they were going to be able to get it back to the Board of Elections. So that's now gone away. 1 week before Election Day is the cutoff to request your absentee ballot. And now that ballot has 4 days after the election to arrive at the Board of Elections instead of the 10 days that previously had existed. But again, for most people, voting, that convenient early voting or absentee voting or election day voting experience is going to look a lot like what you've come to know over the years here in Ohio.
I want to switch gears a little bit and talk about 2019, 20, and 21. We all set records in Ohio each of those years for new business creation. And of course, that's important when it comes to any type of business, including agriculture. That trend continues with some impressive numbers to start this year. Over 16,000 new businesses created in February alone. How does your office contribute to Ohio's strong business climate? And of course, what does that mean for Ohio agriculture?
Yeah, so there's nothing small about small business, right? Nearly 50% of Ohioans work in a small business, and a lot of agriculture professionals are right there as entrepreneurs, as small business owners. And you've heard me say this before, but agriculture is not only Ohio's first industry, but it continues to be Ohio's largest industry, absolutely crucial to our future as a state economically, and to really millions of Ohio families that rely on work in the agricultural sector to earn a living. And so that journey starts at the Secretary of State's office. When somebody wants to live their American dream of being an entrepreneur, that begins by going to vote to ohiosos.gov, the Ohio Secretary of State website, ohiosos.gov. And one of the things that we're really proud of is how easy it is to start a business in Ohio. We charge the lowest fee of any state in the Midwest. It's $99 to incorporate your business in Ohio. And we can generally get you your articles of incorporation within 24 hours. Contrast that to some of our neighboring states that take weeks or even months to give you your articles of incorporation. We know there's nothing easy about running a business, growing a business. That's a challenge, but we at least want to make it easy to start your business in Ohio. And as you're saying, record numbers of Ohioans are responding. 2019, 2020, 2021 were all record-breaking years. Unfortunately, we saw a downturn in new business formation last year. 2022 was the first year in over a decade that we saw fewer new businesses start than before, but we are recovering from that, I'm proud to say. And I think we know why fewer businesses were starting last year. Epic levels of inflation, difficult concerns about supply chain and workforce. This impacts every aspect of business in Ohio, particularly in agriculture. And so fewer people were starting new businesses last year, but Ohio entrepreneurs are once again doing what they do best and overcoming adversity, facing those challenges head on. And they're starting their new enterprise by going to ohiosos.gov and getting articles of incorporation. As you mentioned, we saw record-breaking numbers in January, February, March. We're on track to have another record year in Ohio, and that's nothing but good news for the Buckeye State.
House Bill 95 last year passed new and beginner farmer tax credits, and obviously we're going to see a boom in those new and beginning farmers starting their businesses across Ohio as well, and that's always great to see. Of course, Secretary Frank LaRose, always great to see you. Appreciate your time here on the Ohio Farm Bureau podcast, and we'll see you soon.
And thanks to Ohio's farmers and farm families for all they do to keep our state growing.